Hi, and welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns with the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed.
Each week, we bring you a short conversation with a leader in the field that we think is a voice that you should be listening to. And we are trying to elevate them and to learn from them about their journey as leaders and also distill any sense of wisdom or perspective that they can give you that we think would be useful for you, especially as you start out on a Monday. So that's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom. And Weekly Wisdom is sponsored by Mainstay, which is a student engagement and retention platform that you might be familiar with that used to be called AdmitHub. And they have proven that they work through engaging in peer-reviewed research that you can take a look at mainstay.com. We've seen a couple of these and talk about them frequently. For instance, when Georgia State used Mainstay to be able to reduce their summer melt by 21%. And in a separate study, Mainstay actually helped Georgia State retain 1,200 students that they otherwise thought they would lose. So that kind of stuff is really fantastic. But just in general, the fact that they engage in peer-reviewed research with scholars in the field to prove that their product works. And again, you should check them out at mainstay.com.
Today's guest is the Chancellor of the University of California, Santa Cruz, Cindy Larive. Before she became Chancellor there, she was Provost at the University of California, Riverside. And I understand from Bridget that she's got a very interesting backstory. So welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Doug. Bridget, great to be here.
Well, it's for those of you who don't know, so President Larive, or Chancellor Larive, a long time ago was when I first met her, she was the liaison for the UIA at UC Riverside. That was my first engagement with her. And then later she went on to be the provost. But I think I want to just start there in terms of, Cindy, you're the only person who has had this specific journey to the chancellorship. And I think it's a really powerful example. So other people out there don't think that you need to camp out for 20, 30 years in administration. And so you only had really 3 administrative roles before, including chancellor. Is that true?
Oh, no, I had a few, but I became department chair in 2012 and then went from there to being associate dean for physical sciences and mathematics. And I was interim dean and I was vice provost for undergraduate education. That was the most fun job I had. And then provost and EDC and then chancellor. So that happened over about 7 years.
So 7 years of administrative trajectory, but otherwise you were a faculty member. You were a very involved and engaged faculty member. And then you decided at some point that administration was perhaps, maybe it was, I'm curious about that decision, because I know a lot of people do see it as kind of like, the dark side is a negative reference, but did something happen that made you all of a sudden willing to do that? Or is it you just slowly started getting tapped?
Well, it's interesting. I started my academic career at the University of Kansas, and I'm a chemist. And when I was about 40, I got asked if I wanted to go to some leadership academy. And I thought about it. I talked to my husband and I thought, no, I don't think that's for me. I really like doing science and I was running a big lab. And so I turned it down. And then, a couple times along my journey, I sort of wondered, well, maybe I should have done that. Maybe I missed that opportunity. But then I just sort of focused in on trying to make a difference, trying to make an impact, and doing that through a variety of roles as faculty member. And I was pretty engaged in, my department and my university and in a variety of different ways. And then when I became department chair, I actually discovered I could make things happen that were good for my department and for my colleagues and our students. And so that changed my perspective a little bit. I still continued my lab actually up until right before I came to UC Santa Cruz. It sort of attrited over time, but now I'm not a practicing chemist anymore. But I really enjoy trying to make the university a place where other people can succeed and focus on research and teaching.
How do you, it's a really interesting way of framing it. And I think like so many things in our society these days, there tends to be this sort of increasing sort of bifurcation and a lot of suspicion. And what what is the since you were not exactly a reluctant administrator, but maybe but what's what messages would you share with faculty members who are fully committed to their research and their teaching, and about sort of the what administrative work can do, is it, and what it is, why it's something that, again, you may not think it's best necessarily for all of them, but what are the positives about it, since we hear a lot about the negatives?
Yeah, so the way I frame it, Doug, is that it may not be the thing for you right now, right? And to really not close those doors. I think that faculty are leaders and they exercise leadership in so many ways. Every time I step in front of a classroom, I'm the leader of that classroom, of that experience. Through our research, we're leaders. Through our engagement with our professional communities, we're leaders. So faculty is a leadership role. And I think that I prefer to talk about leadership rather than administration. So administration connotes bureaucracy. There is some bureaucracy to running a university. It's true. We can't escape that. It's one of the things that make things go right at the university. But by leading, you actually empower others to help join you in transformation. That's exciting. And I think often about this transformational power that universities have. And that's a reason to get engaged and to think about leadership and to partner with your leaders. We can do more together, right? When we come together to work on behalf of our mission.
That's great. I was thinking about, in conversation with you previously, I mentioned that, you're in a unique position because being a UC chancellor, your former boss is now your peer on this council. I assume you guys operate as a council. What's that like? I'm curious. And then in general, it brought up for you how to drive collaboration on campus as well. So I'd love to get your take though on that first piece.
Oh, well, thanks, Bridget. So Kim Wilcox is the chancellor at UC Riverside, is my former boss. He's a great friend and mentor. But all the way along, probably it stems from my feelings as a faculty member, right? All the way along, I haven't thought about having a boss. When you're a faculty member, you're your own boss. And I think about that, even now I have a boss. It's President Drake, president of the UC system. But I think that the way I engage is in partnership, right? So if you think about your boss as your partner, and that your job is to work with your partner to have impact, to make change, to do good things, that's a very different way of thinking than I have to make my boss, happy or like me. Really, you're partners in transformation.
And how do you reflect that, as now the boss of other people? How do you try and get them to think about you that way?
Yeah, thank you. It's probably hard, I suppose, for some people, but I'm a pretty approachable person, I think. And when I became provost, I sort of thought to myself, I don't know how to be a provost. All I really know how to do is to run a research group. So I sort of acted as provost like I was running my research group. And when you have a big research group, you have a whole group of people who come together. You think together. Sometimes it's the sophomore who's doing undergraduate research in your lab who comes up with a question that everybody else knows too much to ask. And that question can spark a conversation that really gives you a whole new paradigm to think about. So I think it is listening deeply, it's engaging with others, it's valuing collaboration and partnership, and trying to encourage everybody else on the leadership team to work together in a solutions-oriented way.
I love that. And I love the idea that you expressed, you've done before and today, about that you never really saw yourself as having a boss, that you were always your own boss, but the people you work for are your partners. And I just think that's a really refreshing way to look at your career, because at the end of the day, you are the only one who's really responsible for it. And I'm just thinking about how people talk about, struggling to connect with different generations. That might be a perspective that would be more valuable for younger generations that are not as inclined towards the kind of hierarchical approach of, higher ed traditionally.
Yeah, I mean, another way to think about it is that you're controlling your own destiny, right? And we do hear that narrative by people who want to be in control of their future, of their destiny. It's another way to think about it. But when I think about saying I'm in control of my own destiny, that sounds lonely, right? How do you accomplish things all by yourself? The way you do it is by partnering with other people, and then really being able to move an agenda forward.
That's great. So I did want to ask you about what you've learned. So you were someone who, when I first engaged with you, your humility and your just kind of, you are incredibly approachable, and just like, you seem like the most normal person, right? And none of the pomp and circumstance of higher ed has changed you, which is really refreshing. And it makes you a great collaborator, I would say, as a peer. I've seen that with your allies on other campuses. But I'm curious about, now that you're the boss who tries to get people to collaborate inside your own institution, I'm just curious if you, what you've learned about that experience and what things really work for you.
Well, I think that one thing that works for me is I have an amazing leadership team, right? So having people and hiring people who have a collaborative mindset, who are solutions oriented and want to work together to make positive impact, that's helpful. But we have a good team. One of the things that we did as we were in the midst of the pandemic, we had a budget cut here, $20 million to our campus, plus huge losses in auxiliaries and other things. We brought the whole leadership team together to do scenario planning about how would we make budget cuts. And we thought through that, and it became really obvious to everybody that a budget cut to one division, whether it's an academic division or IT, or student affairs, has downstream effects on every other part of the university. And so that collaborative process of sharing, well, this is what we'd cut at 5%, this is how we'd make a 10% or a 15% cut, that was really, really informative to do that as a team. Luckily, we didn't have to do all that. We instead managed to take the cuts as one-time cuts, not as permanent cuts. And that was a bet that played out for us. But that process of thinking that through together under duress, right, really, I think, brought the leadership team closer together and gave people an appreciation for the contributions that others make.
We've talked a lot on these programs about sort of what leaders have learned from the pandemic, and I think you just offered one sense. What else? How else has the pandemic changed your view of your own work and also your view of how to lead?
Yeah, thank you. It's been an interesting experience, and we realized that some of those hierarchical modes of operation, Bridget, that you alluded to, don't work very well in a pandemic. We had to bring together teams with different expertise and be able to make decisions in real time, and then translate those decisions into actions, and then be able to communicate broadly about what we were doing. That's a different paradigm than universities typically operate under, which is more a group of sort of select people get together, make a decision, and it kind of trickles down. That's actually not a very effective way to get buy-in or to operate with speed and scale. So we learned those lessons because we had to, right? It was important, and we had to do it timely. Now we can take those lessons and the way of operation, which is bring people together by expertise, not just by position, and involving them in decision making, and then translating that decision into action and communicating about it. That we can do for student retention and success, or for organizing new research clusters. We can take that advantage and do it in a more efficient way and in a more satisfying way that leads to action.
That's super helpful. So one thing I'm always curious about is, as when I think about leadership, I think the touchstones of kind of best things about it and hardest things are give you a perspective of how the person thinks. So we've just been talking about hard things, so we can go there, which is as a leader, what for you has been the hardest thing you've had to do, and if you can share what you learned from it.
Well, so in the kind of the middle of the pandemic, we had a complex of forest fires, wildfires that bore down on the campus. Came within a mile and a half of our campus. We had evacuated, and I was communicating every day to the campus, and I was prepared to send a message that, the campus had the fire had breached the campus. Luckily, kind of by some miracle, the wind shifted overnight, and the campus was spared. But that whole process of evacuating, the trauma to people in our community, which still remains. We had 1,000 people lose their homes. We had staff members who were working to support evacuated students, while their whole own families were being evacuated. And then the process of bringing everybody back to campus, and that was hard. That was the hardest thing that we've done. And that experience helped me really get in touch with my own feelings, how I felt about our campus, and how valuable it is, and then really think about what is it that makes a university. I don't know if either of you have been to UC Santa Cruz. It's the most beautiful campus in the world, but it helped me realize that it's not the buildings that make the university, really, right? It's the people that make the university, and that you put the people first. And I remember Bridget being at a UIA convening as part of I think a leadership experience I had, where we had the president from Tulane came and talked about his experience of meeting in Houston and reimagining Tulane. And I thought about that a lot while we were evacuated for the wildfire. What would we do? Luckily, we didn't have to go there.
You were talking about the people, and I just recorded a podcast about last week about turnover and morale, and sort of the emotional and psychological and workplace experiences that a lot of people are struggling with right now. And I guess I'm interested in how you are motivating your campuses, mostly thinking about the employees, I guess, but how you are thinking about keeping people engaged, focused on what they have to do today, hopeful about what's ahead, how you're juggling all that sort of the complicated nature of how we think about our work these days.
Yeah, for me, it's the transformational power of higher education, right? Higher education changed my life from a low-income, first-generation college student, and we do that every day at universities, right? And it is that mission of access, of opportunity, of forward-looking change that I think helps us stay focused on our work, because our work really matters. The issues that you alluded to, though, Doug, really are something I've been thinking a lot about. I think we're all thinking about it. It's the changing nature of work. So if you're at a largely residential campus where students expect a high-touch experience, how do we continue to deliver those experiential opportunities that in-person education mixed with some remote and hybrid and online educational opportunities, but at the same time value in-person, hybrid, and fully remote work as it suits the job, and keep our culture and stay centered on our values. So I think we have to value remote, hybrid, and in-person work, because it is going to be what's necessary for us to be an employer of choice, right? Our employees are going to demand that, want that, as it suits the work. So then how do you retain your culture? How do you keep collaboration going when not everybody is in person, not everybody's remote? I think it was easier for us when we were all remote, right? And so now we're grappling with that. I think we can manage it, but I know we're not alone. I think that most of the tech companies I'm aware of in the Bay Area are all trying to struggle with this. And I think what it means is I'm going to come back to those ideas about collaboration and about impact. If we're really focused on impact, on delivering experience, delivering opportunity, delivering change that the country needs, then that can guide our work. And our partnerships can happen whether we're in partnership together across the table or together across the Zoom screen. So I'm energized by that. We're trying to think about how to navigate it as we've emerged from the pandemic, and to help everybody feel valued and part of a team.
It's interesting, as you were talking about that, it made me realize that your example of the fire in particular, when you get back to that space that we all were not, I mean, that's a way extreme example, but thinking about March of 2020, how we, turned a light switch of everyone going home. And I think that we went through a process of winnowing what was necessary, what was most essential, right? And in the process, what we did is, I don't think we recognized that as we winnowed, I guess we don't need the commute. I guess we don't need to be in the office. I guess I don't need all these things. There wasn't as much of a distilling for kind of like a sifting for the stuff that we needed to not remove. And so it's the things that the burnout epidemic is really, it's really about lack of purpose, inspiration, and community in our work. Those are the three essential elements. And technology is a modality to get those. It can help you get those. In person is a modality to get those. But in general, I don't think we spent enough time prioritizing those three things. They felt like soft and squishy when we were talking about life and death. And those are the things that we have to figure out how to weave into our work, whether it's hybrid, whether it's remote, whether it's in person, because that consistently is actually what it is. And I think about that rushed moment and missing the signal of the stuff that we should have focused on, which are those three things. But I don't think that we've lost too much in terms of ground. I think we can recapture it. It's just focusing on those three things.
Yeah, that's right. And understanding that they won't be the same for every person.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It is going to be a matrix of possibilities and feelings and communities and inspirations across the university.
That's great. So I did want to ask you, and I think perhaps maybe this is obvious, but what has been the most surprising thing for you about your career?
Oh, I think the most surprising thing about my career is that I am in this position and that I enjoy it. I would not have predicted that, even 15 years ago. But it's a great opportunity to lead a campus and to be part of change. And I really enjoy it.
That's great. And I wanted to know if there is, we always ask people about the best advice that has served them in their careers. And I'm curious if you have any one piece of advice someone else gave you that you've used as a touchstone and who it came from.
Well, yeah, the best advice I got came from a mentor of mine at the University of Kansas. His name was Ted Kawana, and he was a kind of senior faculty member who took me under his wing. And he told me, you have to remember that it's not about science. It's all about the people, that the people are the most important thing. So I try to keep that to heart. And I think it is true. It is true. If you put the people first in making difficult decisions and planning for the university, then pretty much everything else will fall into place. So it was good advice.
That is great advice. And I'm curious, as folks reach out to you and seek your counsel, because again, well, I mean, especially after today, people are going to know the people who thought that they missed the boat on administration, or that because they're passionate, just as passionate as you voiced about being a faculty member, that they may not be interested in this. Now they have this new model of 7 years of administrative work and Chancellor, right?
There we go.
I'm curious about what advice you give them.
Yeah, to be open and to let other people know you're interested. You know, we have a number of programs in the UC system. We have a program called Coro, which is a kind of bringing people together around collaborative leadership. The ACE has a fellows program, a faculty fellows program. So there are a lot of opportunities, I think, to be able to kind of show that you're interested and to get those opportunities, but also, focus on making a difference. When somebody needs a chair for a task force or a committee, volunteer, step forward. Don't just be the person left standing because everybody else stepped back, right? But I think if you can do those things and show that you're a solutions-oriented, good partner, opportunities can come your way.
I think that's the perfect advice for us to end today. I hope that has been inspiring to you all at home. Chancellor Larive, it is a delight to have you on. Thanks for being willing to share your story and impart your wisdom. Doug, as always, thanks for being a great co-host. Tune in, same time, same place, and we hope you have a wonderful week.
Thanks so much.